Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. So to continue the discussion that we started about the forbidden sales, and remember in the beginning we talked about the philosophical underpinnings of the financial transactions in Islam. We talked about equity, transparency, accountability, social and environmental responsibility within a teleological worldview where devotion is considered the ultimate, devotion to God is considered the ultimate good. Then we talked about the two different classifications. One that is the traditional classification of valid sales and contracts or valid sale contracts that divides, that addresses the pillars, conditions, and hindrances, al-arkan wal-shurut wal-mawani', and we talked about these within the Hanbali madhab, particularly a summary from Sharh al-Muntaha by al-Buhuti rahimahullah ta'ala. And then we talked about a different classification that I think is a little bit more tangible, where we talked about the process, the object of sale, and extraneous factors, and how all of these forbidden, this list, the long list of forbidden sales, will fit into an item here within this classification, an item here within this classification, and will fit into this framework of the objectives or the maqasid of Sharia in this particular realm of human activity. Now we will continue. In the last lecture we talked about the prohibition of selling that which you do not own. We talked about the prohibition of selling that which have no use, because it will be abuse, exploitation of the imprudence of some people. And then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Qudamah rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book al-Umdat, said, وَلَا مَا نَفْعُهُ مُحَرَّمْ كَالْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْتَةِ. Another forbidden sale is selling that which is impermissible to use. If it has no permissible use, if it is impermissible to use, then you can't sell it. And you cannot sell it to a Muslim or a non-Muslim, because if it is bad for us, it is bad for everyone. If you would not want it for a Muslim, if you don't want it for yourself, you don't want it for another Muslim, you don't want it for another human being, so you just don't sell it, period. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that is reported by Jabir radiallahu anhu, reported in Sahihain from Jabir radiallahu anhu, إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ الْخَمْرَ وَالْمَيْتَةَ وَالْخِنْزِيرَ وَالْأَصْنَامَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, إن الله ورسوله حرم الخمر والميتة والخنزير والأصنام. Allah and His Messenger forbade al-khamr, mayta, carcasses, al-khinzir, pork, and asnam, idols. Then they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they understood that this would mean that it is haram to sell. They said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even if they were not talking about selling in particular, but they asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the shuhum al-mayta. They said, أرأيت شحوم الميتة أرأيت رسول الله شحوم الميتة فإنه يطلى بها السفن وتدهن بها الجلود ويستصبح بها الناس قال له حرام. So they said, what do you think, O Messenger of Allah, about the basically the shuhum, the oil, or the fat of carcasses, to take the fat and use it because they use it for basically coating the ships and greasing leather, and also they use this fat as oil in their lamps. And they had different uses of it. So the Prophet ﷺ said, La huwa haram. No, it is not. No, it is haram. No, it is haram. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, قَتَلَ اللَّهُ الْيَهُودِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَّا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْهِمْ الشُّحُومَ أَجْمَلُوهَا فَبَاعُوهَا وَأَكَلُوا ثَمَنَهَا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punish the Jews. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the fat for them, the fat of carcasses for them, or the fat of certain animals for them, they melted it and they sold it, so they charge the price for it, and they used that price, or they took that money, or they made a profit out of it. And certainly, as you would understand, naturally understand as a Muslim, that the mention of certain qualities of the people of the book, certain deviations, certain infractions of the law that they committed, as iniquities, acts, wicked acts of rebellion, such as when they were lost in Sinai, for instance, for 40 years because of rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Prophet ﷺ says this, it does not mean that each and every one does this. It does not mean that each and every one is responsible for this. We as Muslims have these issues already ironed out. We understand that some people may have confusion about these issues, but we do have, like in our deen, لا تزر وزرة وزر أخرى, no bearer of burden will be asked or will be required to carry the burden of another soul. No soul that carries a burden will be asked to carry the burden of another soul. And we have in our book also, من أهل الكتاب من إن تأمنه بقنطار يؤديه إليك ومنهم من إن تأمنه بدينار لا يؤديه إليك إلا ما دمت عليه قائما. And of the people of the book are those that when entrusted with a huge measure of gold, they will readily pay it back. And those who are, when they entrust them with a dinar, one sort of single gold currency, they will not pay it back. So they're different. ليسوا سواء, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, they are not the same. But certainly it would be natural, it would be expected that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who came to correct the Quran, that came muhayminan ala ma qablahu min al-kutub, that came to basically correct the deviations that took place in previous nations, that these infractions of the law and these deviations will be pointed out by the Prophet ﷺ. That is part of the trust, part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him for, to point out these deviations. Okay, so then the Prophet ﷺ, what was he critiquing here? What was he basically blaming them for here? For selling a haram item, an item that is haram for them, the selling it and making profit out of it, because they sold it to the Gentiles. They sold it to the Ummiyin and the Gentiles. And for us, it is basically across the board. We should not sell these things. And it is quite obvious that when we go out to different neighborhoods and set up shops to sell wine or whatever haram stuff, it is just like basically oxymoronic. It doesn't make any sense. People will not look favorably at us. If it is haram for you, why are you selling it to me? If you think it is bad for you, why are you selling it to me? It is awkward. It is wrong, and certainly it is clear here that we cannot do this. So something that is unlawful, of unlawful benefits, such as wine or carcasses. We also said pork and idols, anything that does not have a permissible use. Now, then the Shaykh said, وَلَا بَيْعُ مَعْدُومٍ كَالَّذِي تَحْمِلُ أَمَتُهُ أَوْ شَجَرَتُهُ, something that's non-existent, such as the fetus one's female slave is expected to conceive, or the fruits one's tree will bear. We will not go back and talk about slavery in Islam and the different points. It is in your book. But certainly the one thing that we wanted to point out here is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where so this is not talking about this is not talking about the fetus that's your own child for sure, and this is not talking about separating between, because separating between a woman and her child would be forbidden. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ مَنْ فَرَّقَ بَيْنَ وَالِدَةٍ وَوَلَدِهَا وَبَيْنَ الْأَخِ وَأَخِيهِ. May Allah curse the one who separates between a woman and her child, or between a sibling and his sibling. And this hadith was reported by Tirmidhi, considered sound by al-Hakim, and accepted by the fuqaha. But outside of this context, it is still haram to sell something that is basically a gharar. So when we talked about ما نفعه محرم, that which has a haram use only, so لا تبع ما ليس عندك, that which you do not own, and here haram use and useless. We did cover this and we said where it belongs. Haram use is what we're talking about. Where do you find this here? Haram use. So it is not sellable because, okay, it does not meet that condition. It is not sellable. And here it is, you know, it's here. And here, where do you find it? Not, You could put this under socially responsible, but certainly it belongs here also, because if it is haram, then it does belong here to the, like, our responsibility towards God, our responsibility towards God. Then the Sheikh said, so what about the ma'doom? The ma'doom is the non-existent, or yet non-existent. Yet non-existent. Yet non-existent. That is, if you say, for instance, and let's not, just move beyond the issue of amatu and stuff. If you say that this tree of mine, it's a mango tree, I will sell you whatever mangoes this tree grows during the season. No mangoes yet. It's called yet non-existent. That is not permissible. And why is it not permissible? Because of what? Gharar, undue risk-taking. Where is gharar? Here. And where is gharar? Here. Gharar is all over the place in Islamic transactions. It has a big place in Islamic transactions. Why? Because gharar compromises what? The concept of transparency. Gharar, undue risk-taking, compromises the concept of transparency. You will find the gharar permeating the prohibition of gharar. Certainly some gharar can be tolerated, right? When you buy a coat, you get to see the lining inside. When you buy a building, do you get to see the foundation? So you're not going to be able to see everything. Some gharar has to be tolerated because of the haja, because of the need to tolerate that level of gharar, that level of opaqueness. Then the Sheikh said, "Wala majhul kal-haml." Something unknown, such as the fetus in the womb. You have like a sheep, or you have like a camel, and you sell, and that camel is pregnant, and you sell the haml, you sell the fetus inside. That is, it's not yet existent. It is existent, but it is inside the womb of the camel. So you can't sell it because it is not identifiable. It's not known, and it belongs to the gharar as well. It's not known, gharar. So you can't sell the fetus in the womb. Can you sell the camel with the fetus inside and up the price a little bit because it's a pregnant camel? Yes, but in this case, يغتفر في التابع ما لا يغتفر في الأصل. In this case, more leniency will be shown to secondary contracts or clauses in contracts versus the primary contract. So you will be stricter with regard to the primary contract. You will show leniency with the secondary contracts or the clauses in the contract to facilitate the primary contract. Because if you're strict all through, you will impede the law of contracts. But if the primary contract, and that's the issue of the end, that you could have a primary intent and a secondary intent, and the secondary, that's philosophically a well-established concept, that the primary intent, the greater, the larger intent should supersede the secondary intent. Even just war is basically justified within that context. So here, if you're selling the camel with the fetus inside and upping the price a little bit because it's a pregnant camel, it is allowable. But you're not selling the fetus because the fetus here will be the primary contract and the object of the primary contract will be unknown. Gharar, undue risk taking. Okay, and then then the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala said, وَالْغَائِبُ الَّذِي لَمْ يُوصَفْ وَلَمْ تَتَقَدَّمْ رُؤْيَتُهُ. Something absent that has not been described or previously inspected. Something absent that has not been described or previously inspected. And they disagree all the time over the details of how you describe it, what would be allowable. In your book, I did not mention this, but in the Hanbali madhab, it has to be allowable as a salam. You know, the item that will be sold in this way, that will be allowable if described. If described, has to be like an object that you could sell as a salam in an advance payment transaction. But let's just focus on what we're talking about here. So you cannot sell an item that I have not seen. You cannot sell me an item that I have not seen unless you have described it to me. That is the position of the majority. The Shafi'is say, even if you describe it to me, you can't sell it to me. I have to see it. The majority would argue that, but there is a disagreement within the Shafi'i madhab as well. But the majority in this case will argue what? Will argue that, that Uthman and Talha, and it is in your document, that Uthman and Talha exchanged two houses. Uthman had a house in Medina, Talha had a house in Kufa. They exchanged the two houses, but Uthman said to Talha that I have the option of khiyar al-ru'ya, which is the option of inspection, the option of return upon inspection, the option of return upon inspection. After they made the contract and they finalized the contract, Uthman did not like the house in Kufa. And you see, Uthman and Talha, these are Ashara Mubashirin, but these things happen between people. They were human beings. The model generation was a human generation. It had to be a human generation to be a model generation. So the model generation was a human generation. So Uthman did not like the house in Kufa. And then he wanted to get out of that sale or that contract. Talha did not agree. He said, we're done, and then they sought arbitration. But it is a model generation. They were able to resolve it. They sought arbitration. They went to Jubair ibn Mut'im. And they said to Jubair, look at this, And Jubair supported Uthman. He said, yes, he has basically khiyar al-ru'ya. Khiyar al-ru'ya, which is the right of return upon inspection. Right of return upon inspection. So then, most of the sales, most of the online sales are not sales of things that you have inspected, even though you've seen pictures. But they would still be permissible according to the majority because the description, particularly in online sales, like if you go to Amazon or eBay or those places, the description is pretty detailed. So the Shafi'is will say that this is still gharar. And they can make a case for this because sometimes you see an item and you see the picture and everything and it comes to you and you're completely surprised. It doesn't look anything like the one I saw. And so they can make a case for this. They can make a case for gharar. You guys are too warm here or you're good? You're good? Okay, it's not too warm? Okay. So they can make a case for gharar here. The Shafi'is can make a case for gharar. But the majority will come back and say this gharar can be tolerated. The description will take the edge off of gharar. So that we can't tolerate this much gharar. Particularly that the majority said we will give the option to the buyer if the item turned out to be unlike the description. That's the Malikis and Hanbalis. The Hanafis said whether the item turned out to be like the description or not, we will still give the option to the buyer upon inspection. So the Hanafis would give the option to the buyer whether or not the item met the description or was like the description. So most of the online sales are Hanafi nowadays, right? Because they'll give you the option whether or not, right? So they meet. They're following the Hanafi position here. So a good description takes the edge off of gharar or undue risk taking, and then the option of return upon inspection will even add like a more sort of transparency to the process. So here it meets the criteria. It meets the criteria. Sometimes, and this is something that I may have not mentioned, but sometimes when you have tension between this area and this area and this area, we said there is a fourth area, but I didn't even include it. It would be here. People who stick to the examples that were given by the earlier scholars. That is not fiqh to begin with. But if there is tension between this area, and this area, what do you do with this tension? Some people will favor this area, so they will favor the maqasid, the equity, transparency, accountability, and social responsibility. But the most important thing that we have to start out by saying is that do not presume the tension. The tension may be in your head. Try to reconcile, because the Sharia is basically harmonious. As there should not be tension between the maqasid, the principles and guidelines, and the detailed rulings. Oftentimes the tension is in your head. So try to reconcile. But if there is a tension that is irreconcilable, and the tension was basically imposed by the conditions, which one should you favor? Certainly you should not favor the detailed rulings over the objectives. Like, let us say, within the current environment that is inconsiderate of the principles of Islamic, the guidelines and the principles of Islamic transactions, financial transactions, and within this environment, you want to basically craft a financial product. You have the framework, the philosophical underpinning, you have the principles and guidelines, and you have the detailed rulings, and you're trying to be faithful to all of the three layers. You certainly should be primarily faithful to this area, secondarily faithful to this area, and tertiarily, if that's a word, faithful to this area. So you do need to follow this, but don't create the tension in your mind and then try to. So what if you can't? What if it is too difficult? Okay, and here's the big problem, particularly in the area of Islamic finance and Islamic, Islamic banking, Islamic finance, and so on and so forth. And that is the area of contention between two different views concerning this. Sometimes if the product, like the financial product that you will basically introduce to the market, if it meets the criteria here, and if you can patch up a contract that is sort of compliant with the different madhahib, and it meets the criteria here and to some extent here, but it's not compliant with the Islamic spirit of finance, it's not compliant with these criteria here, it's not compliant with the whole framework, what should be our stance from this? Like, should we agree that, so some people will say, if we are unable to produce something that is compliant with the Sharia in spirit and letter, was compliant with the letter and spirit of Sharia, let's not produce anything, and let us wait for when we can produce financial products that will be not only compliant with the letter through patchwork, but also compliant with the spirit of Sharia, and actualize or realize the objectives of Sharia. That is one way of looking at things. The other way of looking at it is, no. If, and that is an important condition for this other way to be a valid, legitimate way. If I will not be, if the products that are in the market will not surpass me in any of these objectives. Will not surpass me in any of these objectives. I will provide a financial product that is just like the market in this regard, comparable to whatever is there in the market in this regard, but more compliant with the Sharia in this area and more compliant with the Sharia in this area. Make sense? So here what I did is I produced something that is comparable to what is there in the market in terms of equity, transparency, accountability, social and environmental responsibility, but it is somewhat more compliant with Sharia here in this layer and more compliant with Sharia in this layer. Should I be blameworthy here? And then when we establish, Islamic finance, so then we could start work, when we have like basically a place in the market, a foot in the market, establish ourselves, then we could improve our products so that they are even more and more compliant with the Sharia in this area. That's another way of looking at it. The other people will say, but you will have already ruined the name of the Sharia and the reputation of the Sharia because you provided products that are technically more compliant with the Sharia but not more compliant in spirit. Very comparable to what is there in the market, and oftentimes because of your size and because of your inability to compete, you tend to cut corners a little bit here and there so that you can compete, and it ends up a little bit worse than what is there in the market in terms of equity, transparency, accountability, and social responsibility, social and environmental responsibility. Should I convince you of any of you? No, I don't actually want to convince you because I don't want to indoctrinate you. It's just like, but this is basically the tension between the two views. And we don't always have to divide ourselves into groups. Groupism is a destructive sort of disease. We don't have to, these are views, different views. Some good people could espouse one view and some other good people could espouse the counter view. That is fine. We have to learn how to live together. These are good people. They want good for Islam and they are not really conspiring against the deen or against the Sharia or anything, and are trying to not, most of them are not trying to exploit our religious feelings or make profit out of the Sharia. So have husn al-dhan, be more positive. Just try to be more positive. Less bickering, less criticism. Direct the criticism to yourself. You can find so many, just look in the mirror, you could find so many things that are wrong, that need to be corrected. That's your spiritual mirror. Look in your spiritual mirror, you'll find so many things that should keep you busy for the next 65 years. And then just like sort of examine or direct the lens of your microscope to other people. Most of the people are trying to basically comply with the Sharia. They're trying to do good for their deen. So have husn al-dhan. But at the same time, be critical of the views. The views themselves, you could be critical of them. Don't be critical of the people, but be critical of the views. Say, and if you want to be assertive, you can be assertive. Say, no, I disagree with this, I vehemently disagree with this, I see that, but don't basically cast the doubt on the intentions of people, because that is a realm that is kept, that is concealed. That is the dominion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, prerogative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyway, but that is usually the problem here, is the tension that happens sometimes between these layers. Then the Shaykh said, وَلَا مَعْجُوزٌ عَنْ تَسْلِيمِهِ كَالْآبِقُ وَالشَّارِدُ وَالطَّيْرِ فِي الْهَوَاءِ وَالسَّمَكِ فِي الْمَاءِ. Something undeliverable, such as a runaway slave, stray livestock, birds in the sky, fish in the water, because it's undeliverable. So undeliverable here. And in this case, here it would meet the gharar issue. undeliverable. And the ownership is not complete ownership, although you still own it, but it is like if you own it, I mean, if you had owned it, but you don't possess it. And if it is undeliverable, then it will be basically, it will compromise this. It is, because you really can't tell if you can deliver this or not. Then the Sheikh said, وَلَا بَيْعُ الْمَغْصُوبِ إِلَّا لِغَاصِبِهِ أَوْ مَنْ يَقْدِرُ عَلَى أَخْذِهِ مِنْهِ. Something that has been unlawfully appropriated or misappropriated or unlawfully appropriated by force, except to the one who misappropriated it or to one capable of seizing it from him or her. One capable of seasoning. So if you have a commodity and someone took it by force from you, misappropriated, or a piece of land or something, and someone misappropriated, غصبها, then what can you do? It is your own. You own it, but it is maqsoob, like it's undeliverable because it is maqsoob. You can sell this to someone who is stronger, who can actually take it from them, because you have the contract, you have the deed, you have the thing, you sell it, you go, like in Egypt, for instance, you sell it to Zabit Shorta, you sell it like a police officer, and they'll figure out, they will not have a problem. And then, or you sell it to the person who misappropriated it. And then you may say, if you're Kantian in your philosophy, you may say, but that is unethical, because that will empower the person who misappropriated it, and that will be yielding, giving in, and yielding to evil, and so on. But here's the philosophy of Islam. Islam is not utilitarian in the sense of, Benthamite utilitarianism, and it is not Kantian, or it does not espouse the categorical imperatives of Kantian in the sense of like strict Kantianism, but it is somewhere in the middle. Islam would favor a settlement over a protracted dispute. Because here's why. Sometimes the person who misappropriated the property may truly believe that it is theirs. Isn't that true? Sometimes in these disputes, both parties have strong feelings, they have strong convictions that they are the rightful owners. So if the person who misappropriated your piece of land truly believes that the border between you and him used to be here and not there, in this case, instead of a protracted dispute, if you cannot prove it, if you take him to court, you can't prove it, instead of a protracted dispute, if he agrees to buy it from you, sell it to him. If he agrees to buy it from you, in this case, that would be a settlement that would end a dispute, and sulh in Islam is giving precedence over, disputation, conflict. You don't like it. You look like you don't like it. No, but huh? You disagree?
Yes.
Why?
If somebody takes something from you by force.
Well, if you can't take it back from them.
You are legitimizing the transaction.
Huh?
You are legitimizing the transaction.
But if you, yes.
The transaction.
But
Thinking politically yourself.
you're thinking politically. But Salah ad-Din agreed on compromise. And that is why Salah ad-Din was successful, because he always agreed on compromises. And that's the part of the history that we don't want to be sort of forthcoming with, because Salah ad-Din was not always about, conquering and capturing and winning and victory. It was about shrewdness in politics. He was always making treaties, he was always agreeing and making compromises, and so on and so forth, and that is why he succeeded, and he continued to succeed. But at any rate, this is not a political issue. We're talking about someone who is now, we're disagreeing. There is this line between my land and your land. You believe it was here. I believe it was there. Every one of us has strong convictions. Then we agree on a settlement. You said, if you think that this piece of land is yours, I will buy it from you for this much money. It is less than the market value, maybe, probably less than the market value, but you will say, well, let's just end this dispute, take it, for this, and this would be permissible. Okay, now moving right on. Next one. ولا بيع غير معين كعبد من عبيد أو شاة من قطيع إلا فيما تتساوى أجزاؤه كقفيز من صبرة. Something not specifically designated, such as a slave or a sheep from one's herd, unless it is a property whose parts are similar, in the case of a qafiz from a heap of produce or something. So different items. Like you have a herd of sheep, you can't say, I'll sell you one of the sheep, because it's undesignated. Gharar, undue risk taking, unknown. Where is it unknown? Yeah, unknown. It's not known. So it's not designated. Unless you have a heap of produce, تتساوى أجزاؤه means that it is basically fungible, basically substitutable. Like every measure of it is equal to the equal measure. So you have like wheat, and it is all one type, and you say, I'll sell you any, sell you 1 pound of that heap of wheat for this much money. Is that okay? Yes, it is okay. Because any pound is like any pound, unlike the sheep. Not every sheep is like the other. We will disagree over which sheep. If I tell you, I'll sell you one of the sheep here for a dinar, and we finalize the contract, and we come to the time where you give me the sheep. We get to disagree. I'll tell you, no, I wanted that one. And you tell me, no, you'll take that one. But if it is a heap of produce or wheat or something, then we will not disagree. Then the Sheikh said, وَنَهَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الملامسة وعن المنابذة وعن بيع الحصى. The Prophet ﷺ forbade sale by mere touching or mutual casting, as well as sale by throwing stones. The Prophet ﷺ forbade sale by mere touching or mutual casting, as well as sale by throwing stones. Throwing stones is when you throw a stone and you say, wherever it lands, that product, that commodity, that garment is mine for this much money. Or across the land, wherever it reaches, all the land between me and wherever that stone falls is mine for this much. These are all like ridiculous types of sales that they used to do because of human interest in gambling, or wicked human inclination towards gambling, wicked human inclination towards gambling and undue risk taking. So in this case, the Prophet forbade all of this. Where is it here? Transparency. See that transparency is so big. Gharar, not known. Then the Sheikh, and this is reported, the exact wording of this came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. نهى الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم عن بيع الملامسة والمنابذة وعن بيع الحصى. And then وعن بيع الرجل على بيع أخيه, sale by one outbidding one's brother, sale by one outbidding one's brother. One's brother here is inconsequential, according to the majority of the scholars. It is inconsequential according to the majority of the scholars. The majority of the scholars, such as what Taqiyuddin al-Subki, Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki rahimahullah said in his Takmila of al-Majmu', in the part of al-Majmu' that was written by him. Keep in mind that al-Majmu' was written by 3 scholars. One of them is a contemporary scholar. Imam Nawawi started it, did not finish it. It was completed. Part of it was completed by Taqiyuddin al-Subki, and part of it was completed by one of the contemporary scholars who used to be a mufti in Egypt. But in the part that was by Imam al-Subki in Majmu', he said that this is inconsequential, because it usually you would be selling to Muslim brothers, even if it's specified Muslim, because the usual scenario is that Muslims are in the market are dealing with each other. But it does not mean that the ethics of financial transactions are limited in their application to Muslims. They are universal ethics. You apply them with anyone, whether it is your brother in humanity, your brother in the religion, your sister. The word brother here is inconsequential according to the majority, and the correct view and the only sort of justifiable view in my own sort of thinking. But here, outbidding your brother, there is the two forms of outbidding your brother. There is bay' ala al-bay' and there is sawm ala al-sawm. Bay' ala al-bay' is when you outbid your brother after the sale is finalized. Sawm ala al-sawm is you outbid your brother before the sale is finalized. So two parties here are talking to each other about a commodity. So you go to the market, and that usually, nowadays you're not going to go to Microsoft or Apple and try to buy a laptop and find someone doing this to you. But if there is a transaction between two individuals here, and you want to sell your laptop, and the buyer offered $800, if you as a seller show sort of acceptance, approval of the bid of the buyer, no one else should intervene in this case and come in and say, but I will offer you 900. Because in this case, that is sawm ala sawm. That is outbidding before the sale is finalized. Bay' ala al-bay' is even worse. Bay' ala al-bay' is invalid in the madhab. It's forbidden and invalid. Sawm ala sawm is forbidden but not invalid. The sale afterwards will be valid, although it is forbidden. But if the sale is finalized, then it would be bay' ala al-bay'. Then it would be outbidding after the sale is finalized, which is worse. So if there is khiyar, if there is an option to return, you go and say to the buyer, if you're another seller, for instance, you go and say to the buyer, how much did you get this for? $800. You got this laptop for $800? I'll give you a similar one for $700. That is outbidding the other seller. In a sense, it is sort of undercutting the other seller. If the buyer has an option of return here, he will go back and return the product and come and buy it from you. All of these are forbidden transactions. All of these are, when does the prohibition start? In the case of sawm, where the prohibition starts from the time the two parties show approval of the agreement. Show approval of the agreement. Then the prohibition starts. And it's reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ, لا يبيع بعضكم على بيع بعض. You should not, and here it did not say أخوك, it just said لا يبيع بعضكم على بيع بعض. No one should outbid, you should not outbid each other in your transactions. You should not outbid each other. Keep in mind that there is a hadith that is reported by Sunan also. It's a beautiful hadith where a merchant, a Jewish merchant, to show you that the Islamic ethics are applicable across the board. A Jewish merchant came to Al-Madinah with wheat, or so, like, well, what is it? Maybe wheat or something. No, not wheat. Maybe sha'ir or something. But he came in with something, grains, some grains. And he said that each mud of this will be sold for 1 dirham. Each mud of this will be sold for 1 dirham. And during it was a time of hardship in Medina. I don't want to say famine necessarily, but it was a time of hardship in Medina where food was very scarce. The companions went to the Prophet ﷺ and told him this Jewish merchant came to Medina and he's selling 1 mud for a dirham. That's too expensive. And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, I would love to meet Allah without forcing anyone, or without taking anyone's money, without the contentment of their heart. Without the contentment of their heart and giving it to someone else. And he refused to fix prices. And in some hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that God is the only fixer of prices, musa'ir. God is the only fixer of prices. Like, I would not do this. And that gives you like a hint about, the free market idea in Islam. And in fact, if I remember correctly, Adam Smith talked about the Dawlat al-Khilafa as the brightest model of free market in the history, in the ancient history. Adam Smith himself, as far as I remember, if I remember correctly, but I do think so. If you should try to Google it. So the concept of free market in Islam has been an established one. Going back, then the Prophet ﷺ said, but there are certain things I want to tell you about your sales. You don't outbid, don't provocate, don't do this, don't do that. وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. And be, O servants of Allah, brothers. This involved the Jewish merchant, by the way. The beginning of the hadith is about a Jewish merchant. So he's given a universal message to humanity. Be brothers. And he's given a message to rulers across all times: allow the market to be free. Don't fixate prices. Certainly, in certain conditions, the muhtakir would be forced to, the person who's making ihtikar or monopolizing commodities that are essential for the community, then that muhtakir will be forced to release that, or to allow the people to purchase the commodity. Like we cannot allow the people to die because someone wants to store all of their wheat or all of the rice or this or that, like one of the food staples that people rely on for their sustenance and their survival. It's there, Adam Smith?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was actually Adam Smith that talked about the free market and the state of Khilafah. Okay, did I miss anything here? But this is the important concept. It was a Jewish merchant. The Prophet told him, I will not force him to sell to you for cheaper. As a ruler, this is not my prerogative, it's Allah's prerogative. I should allow the market to operate freely. But at the end of the day, if they were dying, it would have been a different story. It would have been a necessity. And then he said, وَكُونُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا, and be, O servants of Allah, brothers, which means the universality of this message, which means that the Islamic ethics are applicable across faiths. It's not limited only intra-faith, but interfaith as well. Then the Sheikh said, وَعَنْ بَيْعِ حَاضِرٍ لِبَادٍ وَهُوَ أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ سِمْسَارًا, sale by a town resident on behalf of a nomad by being a broker for him or her. Sale of a town resident by a town resident on behalf of a nomad by being a broker for him or her. And this is important. This idea is important. And I may go a little bit over time, but we want to finish this because it's all interconnected. وعن بيع حاضر لباد. The Prophet ﷺ said, clearly, لا بيع حاضر لباد. No town resident should sell for a nomad. And Ibn Abbas said he should not be a broker for him. When he interpreted the hadith, he should not be a broker or a samsar for him. What does that mean? Al-Mardawi in Al-Insaf said there are 5 conditions for this prohibition to be applicable. The bad, which is the badi, which comes from the badia, the Bedouin, the nomad, the outsider coming into town. لا يبع حضر اللباد, the mirror image of this, or connected with this also, ولا تلقوا السلع قبل أن تهبط إلى الأسواق. Do not, which is interception. We did not say that you do not outbid your brother belongs where? Here, right? It compromises this, your responsibility to the creation. So you don't outbid your brother. It compromises what here? It is not equitable and it is not socially responsible. Okay, going back to the Hadir and Bad. He is coming from outside of town. He has goods and he wants to sell those goods. He wants to sell them for a particular price. He does not know the prices, in town, but he would be satisfied as a nomad. He would be satisfied selling, his one sheep for a dinar, for instance. He would be satisfied selling his sheep one for each one for a dinar. Then, when is it impermissible for you as a town resident to be a broker for him? One, he's coming in and he is already intent on selling for a dinar and he does not know the prices, and you go out to him and you tell him, no, don't sell for a dinar, I can help you get 2 dinars per sheep. In this case, that brokerage is forbidden, and you actually sell it to him for a higher price than the price that he intended to sell it for. That brokerage is forbidden. You will make a little bit of money because Islam wants to remove the intermediaries. You will be making a little bit of money, but you will be causing hiking or causing the prices, upping the prices for the rest of the people in town. If that nomad was satisfied with 1 dinar for their sheep, you should have allowed the nomad to get to the market and sell himself to the town residents. And the Prophet ﷺ, how did the Prophet justify this? He said, let Allah, provide or give profit to people from one another, or make profit from one another. Cut out the intermediaries. Allow the producer to meet the consumer. Allow the producer to meet the consumer. Cut the intermediaries. But the Prophet at the same time said, and this is reported in Bukhari, mu'allaq, but reported in Bukhari and others, and considered sound. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا اسْتَنْصَحَ أَحَدُكُمْ أَخَاهُ فَلْيَنْصَحْ لَهُ. Whenever one of you consults their brother, he must give him good counsel. He must give him good counsel. If that nomad came to you and consulted you, you'll have to tell him the truth. You'll have to give him a good counsel. You do not seek the nomad out to tell them, you should sell for higher. If the nomad came to you, and asked you, I have this herd of sheep, I came to sell them in the market. How much do you think, what are the going prices in the market? You have to be, he's your brother. Or just like a human being. You have to be truthful, you have to give them proper counsel. And then in this case, you tell them, no, it actually, you could actually sell for higher, you could sell for two dinars because the going prices are such. Is that clear? Because that is extremely important here. You're not, because here you are being motivated by self-interest. In the first case that is forbidden, you're being motivated by self-interest in getting a commission and causing, harm to the rest of the people on the market and getting your own commission. But in the second scenario, you're being dutiful you're being truthful, you're being dutiful, you're being frank and forthcoming. And that's a difference.
What about if it's a service?
If it is a service, it is also acceptable. As long as you're not seeking them, they are seeking you. As long as you're not seeking them, they are seeking you. Not seeking them, it does not mean that the service cannot be advertised. But you're not going out to them in particular, and because it is the 5 criteria that Mardawi mentioned. The nomad does not know the prices. He came intent to sell on at a particular price. You sought them out. You sold for them at a higher price, and the most important one, the people of this town needed that product. There was a need for that product in this town. So it is not it's not a luxury item. Because if it is a luxury item, you could do all of this. You could seek them out. But if there is a need for this product, and he's coming into town to sell the product for cheaper and would relieve the that need, or relieve that need, then in this case you should not intercept. Interception is by you going out and buying the product from him and then selling it to the people in town. And you should not go out and be a broker for him. Even if you don't buy it, you should not be a broker for him and up the prices for the people in town. This particular scenario, social irresponsibility here is clear, and here is clear. So the communal well-being, the societal well-being, you're compromising the social fabric here by trying to make profit, although you're causing harm to your neighbors. Socially irresponsible. Then the Sheikh said, وعن النجش وهو أن يزيد في السلعة من لا يريد شراءها. Nudge, which is provocation, which is raising the bid without intent to buy, and we did address this, and this is addressed in many hadith where the Prophet ﷺ forbids nudge, which is provocation. Two people are, sort of reaching an agreement, about to reach an agreement. You come in and you say, no, but I'll buy it for more. The price goes higher, and you don't have an interest in buying to begin with. Keep in mind that when we talked before about البيع على البيع, to basically outbid, that does not mean that auctions are haram. That we forgot to say this. That does not mean auctions are halal according to the four madhahib. Some scholars thought that auctions, or felt that auctions were haram because of this, but auctions are halal according to the four madhahib. We're talking about you should not outbid when approval has been shown. But in auctions, approval is not shown until the final price is accepted by the auctioneer. So no approval has been shown yet in auctions. And then there is this hadith from Anas that the Prophet ﷺ sold a rug and a cup, fi man Yazid, which is in an auction. He auctioned a rug and a cup for someone. So in this case, nudge in this case, which is provocation, is when you're not interested and when you're not interested in the product, that would be considered nudge. But if you're interested in the product, that would be considered what? Bay'a ala bay'a, or sawm ala sawm, that would be considered outbidding. All are forbidden. All are forbidden. Nudge is forbidden at any time because you have no interest in the product. Bay'a ala bay'a and sawm ala sawm are forbidden once approval has been shown. Once approval has been shown. Prior to the showing of approval in an auction, you can outbid because the seller has not yet shown approval of any bid. Then the Sheikh said, وعن بيعتين في بيع وهو أن يقول بعتك هذا بعشرة صحاح أو 20 مكسرة أو يقول بعتك هذا على أن تبيعني هذا أو تشتري مني هذا. Two sales in one. This is when one says, I will sell you this for 10 fine pieces of currency or 20 defective pieces. Or I will sell you this on the condition that you sell me that or buy this from me as well. So this is the interpretation in the Hanbali madhab. There is also another interpretation in the madhab as well, which is to say, I will sell you this refrigerator for 500 in cash or 800 in installments. If we do not agree on a particular contract before we finalize the sale, that is forbidden. That is two sales in one. And that is the reason why some of the contemporary scholars said that al-bay' bil-taqsit is haram, that deferred payment sales are all haram. Paying in installments is all haram. You either have the cash or you don't buy it. Which sometimes makes sense, like financially, you should either have the cash or you don't buy it. But but the issue here is that the four mazahib approve sale, payment in installments, and approve deferred payment, deferred payment in installments. And the understanding of the prohibition of two sales in one is when there is no clear agreement on one price prior to finalization of the contract. But if you have cars in your lot and you say, I am selling all the Kia Souls here, 2014 Kia Souls, or my brand new Kia Souls here, I'm selling them for 20,000 in cash, but if you pay over 3 years, here is the price that you will have to pay if you buy over 3 years. If you go and say to him, I will buy it in cash, in deferred payment, and you agree and you finalize the contract this way, then it is halal. But if you take the car and say, if I pay you within 1 year, if I bring the money back to you, then I'll take it, I'll give you $30,000. But if I pay it over 1 year, I will pay you this much. And if I pay it over 30 years, I'll pay this much. That is not halal. The contract because it has to be known. The price and the commodity, they both have to be known, designated, price and commodity. And then the Sheikh said, there is so much disagreement about, I will sell you this on condition that you sell me that. We will come to it later, inshallah, in some other lectures. And then he said, وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, لا تلقوا السلع حتى يهبط بها الأسواق. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, do not intercept goods before they are brought to the market. Interception is when a caravan is coming from outside, and that could even apply to modern transactions. If people who have their own ways of getting bids in any crooked way, all of this applies to them. So allow transparent, equitable process, and don't try to get ahead of everyone else and get a contract. So interception here is when you go out and wait for the caravans that are coming in and buy the goods from them. Here you're not acting like a broker for them. You're actually buying the goods from them. That's interception. You're buying the goods from them, and then you go in and sell the goods for higher prices. And here the idea here is this is socially irresponsible. It higher the prices for people. And also you are using the imprudence of the seller here because you're probably taking this stuff from them for cheaper. And had they had they made it into the market, they would have been able to sell it for a better price. Cut out the intermediaries also.
Are they retailers or wholesalers that are coming into town?
Whether they're retailers or wholesalers, it doesn't make a difference. But you don't intercept them. You allow them to to know the prices, to come into the market and sell to the consumers. You do not intercept them. And then the Sheikh said, وَقَالَ مَنْ اشْتَرَى طَعَامًا فَلَا يَبِعْهُ حَتَّى يَسْتَوْفِيهِ. He also said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if one buys foodstuff, one should not sell it before being in full possession of it all. So you have to basically, because this is the concept of al-Kharaj bid-Daman, you have to be liable for this. You have to move the food so that you're liable for it. It is in your daman, you're the one who's liable for it. You don't buy it from the seller and leave it in their storage and then go out and sell it before you had moved it to your own storage. Because in this case, you are shifting the risk away from you. Capital is trying to shift the risk away to the right and left, to the original seller and the final buyer. I guess that's it. قولوا قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. We'll give 5 minutes for people to leave and then our Q&A session.